Today we're talking about index match again. If you watched my first video on index match, then you know how robust this formula is. But let's say you wanted to take it up a notch and be able to search and pull in data across multiple rows and columns. Well, that's where index match match comes in. Let's fill out this template with the blue boxes on the right using index match match. And we'll look at three different methods to do so. First, let's do a quick refresher on index match. We'll start with equals index. And for the array, what we want to do is bring in the revenue for sparkling water. So let's go over to the revenue column, column F, and we'll select our data, F6 to F23, comma, and now instead of entering a row number, we're going to use the match formula so that it finds it for us. So for the lookup value, we want cell K8 for sparkling water, comma, and the lookup array will be this product column, column C, C6 down to C23. And notice that the row numbers 6 through 23 match in the array and in the lookup array, 6 down to 23. Now that's important, otherwise it won't work properly. Now put in another comma, and for the match type, we'll put 0 for exact match, close paren, enter. Great. So that's how you do a basic index match formula. But let's say we wanted to take it up a notch and be able to drag this formula down to bring in both gross margin and EBITDA. That's where we need an index match match to be able to look up the array across multiple columns. So let's start with equals index. And this time we're going to select revenue and EBITDA in cells F6 through H23. Hit F4 to anchor, comma, match. And for the lookup value, we'll select K8 for sparkling water, F4 to anchor, comma, and the lookup array will again be column C, product type. Let's do F4 to anchor, comma, 0 for exact match, close paren, comma, and add another match. Match and a lookup value will in this case be the P&L item, which is gross margin in cell K10. Hit F4 3 times to anchor on column K, comma, and the lookup array will be these headers, F5 through H5, F4 to anchor, comma, 0 for exact match, close paren, enter. All right, so now we should just be able to drag it across and down. Hit Control Alt V for pay special. For formulas, enter. All right, so July is correct, but the rest of the months are not. And the reason for that is that the index match formula will always bring in the first result, which in this case is July at the top of the data. But in order for it to calculate properly for the remaining months, we need to add yet an additional criterion to our data. And in this first method, the way we'll do it is by using a helper column. So let's go over here to column A, and we're going to create this helper column by adding this formula using equals the month in B6 and the product type in C6. So just hit enter. Go ahead and copy that down. Now let's go back to our formula. And in this first match, where it's looking at the lookup value, we need to add our month. So the lookup value in L5, hit F4 twice to anchor on row 5, add an ampersand or and, so that the lookup value is now looking at both items, the month and the product type in cell K8. And now for the lookup array, all we need to do is rather than have it looking up at product, we just need to drag it over to look at our new helper column that we created. So hit enter. Let's copy it over. Control V for pay special, for formulas. And there you go. All right. It is now working properly. So the next method we're going to use is index match match, but using what we call an array formula. So again, let's start with equals index. And we'll select our array again for revenue and EBITDA, cells F6 to H23, F4 to anchor, comma, match. And our lookup value, again, needs to start with the month, L5, hit F4 twice, and product type in K14. hit F4, anchor, comma, and the lookup array will be B6 through B23. So hit Control Shift down arrow, F4 to anchor, and product type in C, starting in C6, Control Shift down arrow through C23, F4 to anchor, comma, 0 for exact match, close paren, comma, and then we'll add our other match so that the lookup value can bring in this P&L item of revenue in cell K15. So hit F4 3 times to anchor on column K, comma, and the lookup array will be these headers, F5 to H5. Hit F4 to anchor, comma, 0 for exact match, close paren, close paren. And now with an array formula, rather than just hitting enter to finish out the formula, we need to use Control Shift enter. And as you can see, the formula automatically adds these brackets at the beginning and end. And that's how you know that it's a array formula. So now let's go ahead and copy it down. Again, Control V for paste special, F for formulas, Control Shift enter. All right. And then let's do the same for the remainder of the months. Control V for paste special, F for formulas, Control Shift enter. All right. So let's temporarily change this still water header to sparkling water so we can compare and make sure it's working properly. And as you can see, this method yields the exact same results as our first method. Beautiful, working properly. So that's how you use an array formula with index match match. Now, an important note is that if you're on Microsoft 365 or Office 2021, you no longer need to do the Control Shift enter to close out an array formula. Excel just automatically knows that it's an array formula, which is a great, nice little upgrade. But if you're on an older legacy version, then make sure you're still closing out the formula by using Control Shift enter. Otherwise, it won't work. All right, so now let's move down to our third method. Now this is, nice to know. It's really a matter of preference if you're going to use this method, but it's nice to know that it works, because if you're still on an older legacy version of Excel and you don't want to have to use an array formula, then this is a nice workaround. So again, let's start with equals index. Let's select our data, F6 to H23, F4 to anchor, comma, match. And again, our lookup value needs to start with the month, L5, hit F4 twice to anchor on that row, and the product type in K20. Hit F4, comma, and now for the lookup array, in the previous example, we used two separate arrays and then used an array formula. But in this case, we're going to add another index formula. So let's say index, and then we can go ahead and add two separate arrays again, starting with the month, B6 through B23, hit F4 to anchor, and the product type, C6 through C23, F4 to anchor, comma. Now let's close out that index formula with the close paren. And let's close out that portion of this lookup array in the match formula. So let's add another comma, match type 0 for exact match, close paren to finish out that match formula, comma, and then we add our remaining match formula. Match to bring in the revenue in cell K21, hit F4 3 times to anchor on that column, comma, and now let's go back to these headers, revenue through EBITDA, F5 through H5, F4 to anchor, comma, 0 for exact match, close paren, enter. All right, so now let's just copy it over. Control Alt V for pay special for formulas. Okay. And there you go. Right there, right off the bat, you can see that it's yielding the exact same results as our first two methods, and it's working beautifully. So it's really up to you which method you prefer. Each method has its pros and cons. The first method is pretty simple. It just requires you to add an additional column. But if you don't want to deal with that, then that's when you can use the second method in which you're using an array formula. Or if you don't want to have to use an array formula, if you're on one of the older legacy versions of Excel, then that's where you can just use an additional index formula to avoid that. So it's a nice little workaround. And it's nice to know. Perfect. So now let's just finish out this template that we're working on. Let's change this back to still water and iced tea. And then let's do some quick sums. Control R to fill right. I could have done that all at once, but let's do Control D to fill down. And there we go. 2349 for the revenue, 10,175 for gross margin, and 4070 for EBITDA. Ties out. Perfect. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this, found it useful. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk soon.